Have you ever felt too emotionally fragile? A single criticism can weigh on your mind all day. One small failure can make you want to give up. Or sometimes, you don't even understand why your emotions feel so easily swept away. I used to feel that way too. I remember one time, just because of a constructive email from my boss, I lost sleep for a week. Not because the email was harsh, but because my mind was too sensitive. I constantly needed validation. I always wanted everything to be perfect. And when life didn't go my way, I collapsed. Until one day, I read a single line in a Buddhist book. Just a few words. Nothing can hurt you unless you allow it to. That sentence hit me like lightning. It didn't transform me instantly, but it began to change the way I saw the world. I started learning to observe instead of react, to transform rather than suppress, to build inner strength rather than try to control everything. And today, I want to share that journey with you. A journey that doesn't ask you to live in solitude like a monk. Just to begin with something small. A pause, a moment of non-reaction, a short meditation. In this video, you'll discover 10 Buddhist principles to help you build a mind as steady as stone, no matter how loud life gets. Ways to turn negative emotions into fuel for growth. And most importantly, how to master your inner world, instead of letting your emotions master you. If you've ever felt too weak to handle life's emotional storms, stay until the end of this video, because this might just be what you've been needing for a long time. And now let's begin with the first lesson, where inner strength doesn't begin with toughing it out, but with a simple pause. One time, I was sitting in my usual coffee shop, holding a cup of espresso when my phone buzzed. It was a message from a colleague, not long, just a few lines, but the tone felt irritated, even sarcastic. I felt my blood heat up. I began typing a reply, quick, sharp, ready to strike back. But then, I paused, just for a few seconds. I set the phone down. I took a deep breath. And you know what? In that brief moment, I changed the entire course of what could have been a misunderstanding, an argument, and a damaged relationship. Buddhism calls that a sacred pause. It's not forced silence. It's the space between emotion and action, where wisdom can enter before instinct takes over. Usually, when someone hurts us, whether it's a comment or a glance, we react instantly. We think it makes us look strong, but in truth, when we react impulsively, we allow others to control our emotions. True strength is not reacting the fastest. It's having the awareness to pause, observe, and respond with clarity. There was a leader I once admired. Every time he was criticized in a meeting, he never replied immediately. He would simply nod, jot something down, and say, "I'll think about that." No defensiveness, no arguments. And it was precisely that calm presence that earned people's respect. Next time someone upsets you, don't text back right away. Don't raise your voice. Try a 5-second pause. Breathe in, breathe out, and ask yourself, is this reaction coming from wisdom or from a wound? You'll be surprised what happens after that. And this is just the first step. Because if you think strength only comes from silence, wait until you learn how to turn pain into power. Let's move on to the second principle, where every attack becomes a test of your emotional resilience. I once worked with a manager who was brutally direct, and not in a pleasant way. In meetings, in front of everyone, he would bluntly say, "I don't understand how you could do such a poor job." At first, I was genuinely hurt. I felt insulted. I went home and replayed that sentence in my mind over and over, as if it defined who I was. Until one day, a friend said to me, "He wasn't talking about you. He was talking about one specific thing. The issue isn't what he said, it's how you received it." And that's when it clicked. Not every attack is the end of the story. Sometimes it's just a mental workout. Buddhism teaches, no one can insult you unless you allow it. Your mind is like a fortress. If the walls are strong, storms will simply pass by. But if you let every word pierce through, you won't need a cannon. One sideways glance will bring you down. And here's the interesting part. Every criticism is a chance to test the strength of your fortress. Top athletes, especially in American leagues, are often under harsh media scrutiny. But instead of crumbling, many of them use it as fuel. They don't ask, why are they saying this about me? They ask, what can I improve from this? Next time someone criticizes you, don't ask, why are they doing this to me? Try asking instead, what part of me is being trained right now? Maybe it's your self-respect, your composure, or your ability to accept feedback, skills you're still developing. Because if you let your emotions be controlled by others, then you're living their life, not yours. And once you've learned not to let criticism shake you, just imagine, what if you could go even further, not just endure discomfort, but train with it daily? That's what we'll explore next. How monks and some of the strongest people in the world use discomfort itself as a mental gym. Let's continue with part 3. Discomfort is the dojo. I used to be terrified of silence. Whenever I was alone in a quiet room, I'd immediately turn on the TV. If there was nothing to do, I'd scroll through my phone, not because anything was interesting, but simply to escape the feeling of emptiness. And I realized, we live in an age where every small discomfort has a numbing agent. Stressed? Open YouTube. Bored? Open Netflix. Failed at something? Order food, shop online. We don't process emotions, we distract ourselves from them. But Buddhism teaches something entirely different. It's not about running from discomfort, it's about learning to stay with it. Just like warriors train in harsh conditions, the mind also needs to be trained in uncomfortable moments. Discomfort is the dojo, the training ground for the soul. I have a friend in Seattle who wakes up early every morning and takes cold showers. Not because he enjoys it, but because that's how he challenges himself each day. He once told me, if I can step into discomfort and stay calm, then nothing else that day can shake me. And you know what? He's not a monk. He's a creative professional, but with a mind like stone. Next time you feel restless, bored, or tempted to open an app to escape, try doing nothing. Just sit there. Feel the discomfort. Observe it. Name it. And remember, if you can sit still with discomfort, you can face anything in life. When you stop trying to numb your emotions and start training your mind in the middle of the storm, you begin building a foundation as solid as rock. But there's something even more powerful. Emotions aren't just something to endure. They're also a source of energy, and if you know how, you can transform them into strength. Let's move on to the next part. Transmute negative emotions into fuel. A few years ago, I lost a job I thought I would stay in for a long time. It happened suddenly, no conflict, no major mistake. The company simply changed its strategy, and I no longer fit in. That day, I walked home with my mind full of questions. Why me? What did I do wrong? How am I going to get through this? But then a few weeks later, when everything settled down, I looked back at the whole situation, and I saw something clearly. If that shock hadn't happened, I might still be living a safe but uninspired life. Losing the job felt like a disaster, but in truth, it opened the door for me to find a more meaningful job, the one I'm doing today. There's a powerful principle in Buddhism. Suffering does not come from the event, but from how you perceive the event. Pain doesn't come from the loss itself. It comes from the belief that you shouldn't have lost it. And when you shift the question from why is this happening to me, to what is this trying to teach me, then the problem stops being the enemy and becomes the teacher. I know a young woman in New York who was rejected from a full scholarship at the very last moment. She was devastated, but instead of giving up, she spent a year gaining real-world experience, developing new skills. When she reapplied, not only did she get the scholarship, she was also offered a better position, thanks to the growth that failure had forced her into. Next time you face something that feels terrible, try flipping the lens. Ask yourself these 3 simple questions. What might this be protecting me from? What lesson is this trying to teach me? Could this actually be the beginning of something greater? When you start to see every challenge as part of your growth journey, you stop fearing failure, because every fall becomes a springboard for something higher. But if obstacles are just part of the game, then your unprocessed emotions are the real opponent. Anger, fear, envy, if left unchecked, they can burn down the very fortress you're trying to build. In the next section, we'll learn how to transform those emotions into fuel for inner strength, instead of letting them consume you. Let's continue to part 5, transmute negative emotions into fuel. I remember a time when I was just rejected from a big opportunity one had waited for a long time. I was furious, not just at the person who rejected me, but at myself for hoping too much. In that anger, I wanted to quit everything, but luckily I didn't. Instead, I sat down and I wrote. I wrote about how I felt. I wrote about what I truly wanted to achieve. I wrote about how I could improve so that next time, no one would dare turn me down. And then I realized, that anger, if I had acted on it impulsively, could have ruined everything. But if I redirected it, it became a powerful force that pushed me forward. Buddhism offers a beautiful perspective on emotions. They aren't bad. They're just energy appearing, passing through. The problem isn't the emotion itself, but how you use that energy. Anger can destroy, or it can fuel bold action. Fear can paralyze, or it can help you prepare more thoroughly. You don't need to kill negative emotions. You just need to transform them. Many renowned artists, musicians, painters, writers have admitted that, in their darkest moments, they created their most beautiful work. Because they didn't try to shut off the feeling, they turned the pain into meaning. Next time you feel a strong emotional wave, anger, sadness, insecurity, instead of suppressing or exploding, pause and ask, what exactly am I feeling? What is this emotion trying to tell me? How can I use this energy to do something better? Maybe you'll write a journal entry, or go for a long run, or call someone to share what's in your heart. But the most important thing is, you don't let the emotion lead you, you lead it. Emotional mastery doesn't mean never feeling angry or afraid. It means knowing how to turn emotions into meaningful action. And if you've learned how to transform negative emotions into fuel, the next step is an even higher art, observing every emotion without being consumed by it, becoming the one who stands behind the waves, not swept away, just quietly watching. Let's move to the next part. Become the observer, detach and stay calm. There was a time I was stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic in the city center, with only 10 minutes left before an important meeting. The cars ahead weren't moving. The cars behind were honking nonstop. I gripped the steering wheel tightly. Sweat began to drip down my back. Then, I looked to my right and saw an old woman sitting by the roadside selling lottery tickets. She had no car, no meeting. And yet, her face radiated the most peaceful expression. Meanwhile, I, with everything I had, was being overwhelmed by a minor inconvenience. In that moment, I realized something. The truth isn't in the outside world. It lies in how we let the inside world react to it. Buddhism offers a profound practice, learning how to become the observer of your own emotions. Not to suppress them, not to pretend you're fine, but to separate yourself from them and recognize, I'm experiencing anger, but I am not the anger. It's like sitting by a river, watching leaves float by. Each leaf is an emotion, worry, irritation, disappointment. You don't have to jump into the water. You just sit still and let them pass. I have a colleague, remarkably calm, almost never angry. Once, a client shouted at him in front of everyone. I thought he would snap, but he didn't. He simply nodded, listened, and said, I understand you're upset. We can talk more once you're ready. I deeply admired him in that moment. Not because he endured well, but because he didn't let someone else's emotions control his own. Next time a strong emotion arises, instead of reacting, try silently saying to yourself, an emotion is present, but I'm only the observer. You'll notice things begin to soften, not because the problem disappears, but because your mind is no longer tangled in it. When you become the observer, you don't just manage your emotions. You create space within to choose something better. But what happens if you constantly let yourself get swept away by little emotions every day? If you need your phone to feel joy, or need someone's praise to feel worthy. In the next section, we'll learn how to practice emotional fasting, a way to reduce dependence on external stimulation and build a deep inner strength. Let's continue with part 7, emotional fasting, build a mental fortress from within. One day, I tried turning off my phone for 4 hours. No notifications, no Instagram, no messages. At first, I felt restless, as if I was missing out on something important. My mind wasn't used to emptiness. And then I realized, I wasn't just addicted to social media, I was addicted to the constant stimulation. A like, a message, a new video. All of it was like emotional sugar, fast, intense, and always making me crave more. Buddhism has a concept called mental food. It's not just what we eat, but what we consume through our eyes, ears, and emotions. If you always need something to make you happy, if you can't sit still without scrolling, listening, or watching, you might be dependent on emotional consumption, a subtle addiction many don't even notice. Emotional fasting is how we clear the mind. Just like physical fasting cleanses the body, it doesn't mean disconnecting from the world. It means intentionally choosing silence, so your mind can breathe, instead of constantly reacting, consuming, and responding. A friend of mine, a content creator, once burned out completely, not because the work was overwhelming, but because in every spare moment, she consumed something new. Podcasts, videos, music, articles. One day, she decided to try emotional fasting, spending 30 minutes each morning doing nothing. No phone, no conversation, just sitting in stillness. The result? After just 1 week, she felt clearer, calmer, and most importantly, she no longer felt empty. You don't need a long vacation, just a small window each day to emotionally fast. Simple suggestions. Spend the first 10 minutes of your day without touching your phone. When you feel bored, don't open TikTok, just sit and observe that feeling. Take one night each week for a digital detox. No screens, just you and your real space. Your mind is like a garden. If you constantly water it with stimulation, you'll never discover the fertile stillness within. And it's in that stillness that you build a fortress no one can shake. But even when you stop consuming emotional noise, the world will still test you. There will be people who push your buttons. There will be situations that trigger your limits. And when that happens, you'll need to master one powerful skill, non-reaction. Let's continue to part 8. No reaction is ultimate power. The art of staying still while the world pushes. One afternoon, I was waiting in line at the supermarket. The person behind me kept sighing and muttering. When it was my turn to check out, the scanner malfunctioned, and we had to wait a few more minutes. That person blurted out, "Why even come to the store if you're just going to waste everyone's time?" I turned around, and in that moment, I felt the urge to fire back. A sharp response, a cutting glare, a line to shut him down. But then, I exhaled and said gently, "I understand you're in a hurry. I didn't mean to hold anyone up." It wasn't some glorious victory, no applause, but inside me was a quiet, unshakable peace. Buddhism teaches that true strength doesn't come from having the last word, but from staying calm when pulled into the storm. You can't control what others say, but you can always choose how you respond, or whether to respond at all. Like a mountain unmoved by the wind, a steady mind is not swayed by praise or insult. I once read about a Japanese Zen master. When someone insulted him in public, he simply bowed and walked away. The person shouted, "Why don't you say something?" The master smiled and replied, "When someone gives me a gift and I don't accept it, it still belongs to them, doesn't it?" That sentence, to me, is one of the highest expressions of emotional intelligence. Next time someone attacks you, with words, actions, or attitude, before reacting, ask yourself, am I responding to protect the truth, or just to protect my ego? If the answer is ego, then maybe silence is the most powerful response of all. Not reacting doesn't mean weakness. It is a conscious choice, an intentional act of self-mastery, not surrender. But to do this, you must prepare in advance. You don't learn calmness during the storm. You train your mind like a warrior before the battle ever begins. And in the next part, you'll learn a truly powerful technique, a practice used by Buddhist monks and spiritual leaders alike. Dark visualization, training the mind by facing what could go wrong before it ever happens. Let's move on to part 9. Use dark visualization to become unshakable. I have a friend named Michael. He's a loving father. One day, while playing with his son in the park, he suddenly said to me, "I always imagine the worst that could happen, so I know what I'll do if it ever comes." I was surprised. "Aren't you afraid you'll attract bad things?" I asked. He smiled. "I don't visualize to be afraid. I visualize to be prepared." Both Buddhism and Stoic philosophy share a similar practice. Dark visualization, imagining the worst-case scenarios. Not to become pessimistic, but to train the mind to be steady, resilient, and alert. When you fear loss, failure, or separation, you tend to avoid thinking about it. But it's the avoidance that leaves you powerless when it actually happens. When you can look your fear in the eye, it no longer controls you. Great leaders, from CEOs to statesmen, use this technique in various forms. They visualize crises in advance, losing a deal, betrayal, public backlash. And because they've already lived through those scenarios in their minds, when reality hits, they don't panic. They respond from a place of mental readiness. Try spending 5 minutes a week practicing dark visualization. Choose a fear: losing your job, conflict with a loved one, failure. Then ask yourself, if this happens, how will I respond? What can I do now to prepare? What might I learn from it? And here's the strange part. When you dare to imagine the worst, you begin to cherish what you have. A hug, a simple dinner, an uneventful day, all become deeply meaningful. Strength doesn't come from the absence of fear. It comes from learning to live with the possibility of loss, and still keeping your heart open. And once you can visualize the worst and still stay centered, there's one final thing you need to tie it all together. A personal code of living, a compass that keeps you on course, no matter how strong the storm. Let's move to the final part. Create a life code, your unshakable inner compass. One time, I was having a conversation with an older friend, a retired firefighter. I asked him, "How do you stay calm when everyone is running? The fire is spreading fast, and you don't know what's going to happen next." He simply said, "Because I don't need to decide. I just follow my code." I was surprised. "Your code?" He nodded. "My personal life code. In every crisis, I don't need to figure out what to do. I just live by what I already chose." And in that moment, I understood something profound. Resilience doesn't come from always knowing the answer. It comes from choosing to live by unshakable values, even when everything around you changes. Buddhism calls this sila, a moral and spiritual code that helps you stay grounded in a chaotic world. When you have a personal life code, you're no longer driven by fleeting emotions or outside pressure. You don't ask, "What should I do in this situation?" Because you already know. This is who I am, and this is how I live, no matter the situation. I have a friend who works in finance, an industry full of pressure and temptation. But he always keeps a small note in his wallet with 5 lines. "I don't lie, even when it benefits me. I spend 10 minutes in silence every day. I respond, I don't react. I stay out of drama. I always respect other people's emotions." He calls it his mental compass. And in moments of exhaustion or confusion, he simply pulls out that note, reads it, and remembers who he is. Today, you can start writing your own life code. It doesn't have to be long. It just has to be true. Some questions to help you begin. What values will I never compromise? How do I want to act when I'm angry? What will I still choose to do, even when no one is watching? Write it down. Read it every week. And most importantly, live by it. When you have a life code, you don't live based on how you feel. You live based on your direction. You no longer need to ask others who you should be, because you've already decided. And that's where true strength comes from. Not numbness, not coldness, but a soul that is steady, awake, and never loses itself, even in the middle of the storm. You've just explored 10 mental habits inspired by Buddhist wisdom. Each habit a brick, helping build an emotional fortress as steady as a mountain. Remember, the pause before reacting is the beginning of wisdom. Turning pain into power is the art of self-mastery. and living by the principles you choose is how you become the strongest version of yourself. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment with the first life code you want to apply, and subscribe so you won't miss the next journeys in cultivating inner strength. Because you deserve to live with a mind that cannot be shaken.